We're here.
There we go. We are live. Welcome.
Dude, your intro is like a show itself. That's like the show, right? This is like the after party.
All right. It feels that way. I love it. I actually stole that one. It's AI generated. It was created by someone in Zertis's Discord group, and then we were using it for real science. And, well, it's real science, so here we are. But I kind of stole it for all my shows because it's just so awesome.
Tim Ventura. Andreas does a ton of those, man. All of Andreas's intros are freaking epic.
They really are.
Dude, that's big. That's like seriously hardcore. So,
man, you should see his other ones, man. That's not even the best one.
I love your art, Bernie.
Right?
I love your art, man. You do and like I put this in chat, like you're really kind of subtle, you know. Like a lot of people like drop it and they're like, yeah, check this out, but you're just kind of like it's just there, and then over time you're like, man, Bernie's like really freaking creative, you know? So
right, you gotta just hide it in a little bit here and there, everywhere.
Oops. Yeah.
What up, Mike?
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I'd like to make, you know, I've been working on just for the audience again. Let me plug the APEC conference, altpropulsion.com. Please sign up for our mailing list. Even if you can't make all the shows, Bernie got us into using Streamyard. We have webinars that we're doing on Streamyard, and then we're doing an open mic session. And actually, the next one's coming up next weekend. So altpropulsion.com, please join our mailing list. It's private. We're not going to spam you. It's just for invites, but that helps us just basically grow attendance. And if you miss it, it's just like Bernie's thing. You can catch it live on YouTube and you can hit the replay after. So it's really, it's really cool. Bernie, do you want me to give him kind of the short version on the UFO story?
Absolutely, right? Because we were talking
about story time, buddy.
Story time.
Okay.
I know.
First, I'll just introduce everybody quickly that we have myself, of course, Jeremiah joined the technicians, also aka Exotic Propulsion. Charles James down there, aka Esoteric Gold.
What's up?
Love, aka Mikey Does on YouTube, and then of course infamous Tim Ventura of APEC and Tim Ventura interviews. So Tim, take it away.
Story time. Okay. Well,
just kidding. I'm not going to force you to be full screen.
You know, I don't have.
Buddy, let's go.
I don't have notes like in front of me, so I have to kind of go by memory, right? And I'm pretty vague on this, but so I guess, and for most of your audience, this is probably a rehash, but I'll just kind of go through things, right? So we had the Whistleblower Act, right, at the beginning of this year. I mean, the UFO thing has been building and building and building. It's not kind of going down. We had that Whistleblower Act that took effect. Then we had F-16s shooting down balloons in, what was that, February? God, it seems like it was just yesterday that we were laughing at that. And then let me see, maybe that was March. I think it was. And then
there was a few of them, right? First there was the Chinese one, but then like a month later they shot down like 5 more, one over Lake Erie that like was supposedly cylindrical, and it took a whole bunch of these F-16s, the ones up in Alaska, and then even in Canada's Yukon or something. And it was like they were actually being reported as some being cylindrical, some being like actual UAP, not necessarily balloons. It all disappeared from the headlines, or there was like no actual crash retrieval that was shown. Who knows what was actually up there? But
there was a news story, and if you Google this, it was a science club. If you Google like science club F-16 balloon, or it was F-22, I think they were using the new jet and the $50,000 missile. And so the science club, they caught up with them. I don't remember who did this. It was like Aviation Week or something. They caught up with these kids and like their teacher, and they were this, like one of those balloons over Alaska was actually like their science project. And they were like, yeah, we were tracking it on radar and it was headed west over Alaska. And it was last seen right about here at around 40,000 feet, you know? And like, then they were like, it's basically the exact same location that the jet was reported at, you know? And they're like, we think that it might've been shot down, you know? And then at the end of the article was hilarious that they asked him, well, because they were like circumnavigating the globe with this thing, as part of their class project. And they said, are you guys going to put another one up to finish it? And like one of the kids was like, we're afraid that if we put another one up, the Air Force may shoot it down. And I was just like, oh, I just laughed so hard, dude. That was so funny. So that
trolling the government, the kids trolling the government. But at the same time, it's like, man, the government's literally shooting down science projects. Like, you're killing kids' dreams.
Okay, well, if you want to hear, again, I hear all the juicy tidbits. So some might question, right? Some might question why would they use a $50,000 missile or whatever? F-22, yeah, the Raptor, and F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. So
right, exactly, like literally $100,000. Some, like, I believe the one they used to shoot down the Chinese one was like $1 million missile, and it's like literally you could use all of those airplanes have cannons where you could just shoot a couple bullets, and that would cost maybe $100.
And I don't remember the exact terms for it, but I had read this was a DoD thing. I don't remember who was talking about this. The reason they didn't use the cannon was because they can't shoot very well with those. They can't target worth crap, and so they were saying to actually hit it, they had to use the missile. If they use the cannon, even though they have all this super duper computer guidance, all that kind of stuff, they were saying that they're actually not, they're training and this and that, and just the way the whole thing works, the cannon is not that accurate. And I was just like, okay, so that sucks, right? In many different ways. But
wouldn't you think balloons would be the perfect training practice?
Yes,
for honing those gun skills in. That's kind of fun. That's so funny.
So we had that, and then June 6th, we had David Grush, right? And that was what somebody in your audience was asking about that, or somebody in the panel. I don't know how anybody could have missed that story, but so for me, that was like, this whole year has been mind blowing, but that was like a detour into just weird, okay, so we had the last Arrow, right? The anomalous, research organization, the last Arrow conference, they were doing the status quo, which is we are analyzing 600 something reports that have been filed by various military, officials, pilots, stuff like that. We have more videos. At one point, Sean Kirkpatrick, he played a couple of videos, and he's like, okay, we've identified this, right? This is like a balloon or something. And then he played another one of what they call the Mosul sphere, right? Which is like a metal ball that's like flying, it's a shiny metal ball. And he's like, this we haven't identified. And that's it. He just leaves it there.
That was the hearing that Jeremy and Mark went to, right? Yeah. Yes. I remember that was such BS. Because it's like
people panned him for that, but he did reveal I'd never seen that before. It was a new video for most people.
Yeah. So, but there's been 10 other new videos like that Michael Boyd showed and went over about 6 months ago with me, that, or actually maybe even a year now, that the Pentagon had released that were all similar to the Tictoc. And it's like, no, they're not going to go give you any of the good stuff. They're just giving we're investigating the unidentified objects, and we solved this one, and here's one that
well, even the Mosul sphere, right? It's like, did you see it? It's like, wow, it's a UFO. Look, we'll replay it 5 times. They're like, okay, whiplash in the neck. But so June 6th, David Grush does an article in the Debrief. Now, one of the interesting things about this was he had an all-star team behind him. Leslie Keene, and I believe one other person. Leslie Keene actually wrote the original, if I remember right, she wrote the original New York Times article on the UAP thing back in 2017 or something, whenever that broke. So there was her, there was another amazing author. He has his lawyers, because he filed a bunch of stuff with the government. If I remember right, his lawyers are like top notch, right? So there's that, and then there's his background. So David Charles Grush, it's Grusch for anybody who doesn't know it. He had basically worked for a bunch, like the National Geospatial Organization or something like that, the National Reconnaissance Organization, had a top secret clearance or something like that. He had been in the DoD for many years. This guy's background was impeccable. He helped draft the language that went into the Whistleblower Act that he used. And he was like a DoD liaison from some agency to the UAP task force. And so he comes forward and basically says, in the course of my duties researching UAP, I found that the US has like 12 crashed flying saucers that we've recovered. And then he goes on, he did an interview with Ross Coulthart, and I talked to Ross privately about this, but in the interview he says, oh, and yes, we have bodies too, right? So that's like a complete detour. That's like, okay, Mosul sphere, you know, we don't know what this is. It's a UFO, but maybe it could just be enemy. To yeah, crash flying saucers.
Claiming there's at least 12 recovered craft, and then also
bodies
recovered bodies.
And when they and then
I got to make one point is he also came out the day before Stephen Greer's Washington D.C. press disclosure project as well event.
Yes, that they were that the timing, those hit together. And then there was a congressional hearing just a couple of weeks ago where he went through the whole story once again, and he stressed, if I remember right, he stressed non-human bodies. So you know, so what he's talking about is like the classic story, right? Like Roswell 47, all that kind of stuff. So for me, that's like a total left turn into just strange. And the other weird thing was, for anybody who hasn't seen that hearing, you guys got to watch this. You've got there's one moment that got me where like AOC, right? Alexandria,
I watched like an hour of it.
Cortez, she leans over and she starts asking him questions, and like, you know, and she's on the news all the time talking about like social issues, and I was like, this isn't even her thing. She looks at him and she's like really serious, and she starts asking him these questions, and they're really smart, good questions, and I was like, whoa, this is like going mainstream, right?
I was shocked by that too.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the short version. Then there are the rumors. I have heard a rumor that supposedly, I'm not going to put too much credibility in this, but if a disclosure event happens, it's supposed to happen between September and Thanksgiving. That's the rumor. So there's that, and then there are also rumors that there may be more witnesses who are coming forward, and that's literally all I've heard. But so it's interesting. It is interesting. And then I guess the other thing that I could quickly share is on my own channel. What I've been trying to do is connect this to space science more, right? Because you know, my view of things is, I mean, everything that I've done has been covered in the media. I mean, I don't have any really unique knowledge there, but it's like, what can I share that can help people put this in context? I'm like, well, let's dig into stuff like the Drake equation. And, you know, like for me, that's really exciting. I mean, the Drake equation basically suggests, they were saying, for every intelligent civilization using radio, right? There may be, like Frank Drake used to say, there were maybe 10,000 of them in the galaxy. For every one of those, there could be thousands, maybe millions of worlds with primitive life. And there could be thousands or maybe millions of worlds more with ancient ruins. And I was like, man, when you stop and you like take a step back and you look at that, it's like our universe is full of life. That's amazing. That's like amazing, you know? And we just don't think about that, but we should. That's something that we should think about all the time, is we're part of something larger and more meaningful and more beautiful than we think about on a day-to-day basis. So
totally.
So that's what I got, Bernie.
All right.
Well, I would love to pick his mind on the metamaterial. That would be cool.
Pick whose mind?
David Gresh.
Yeah.
He would not be the person to ask on metamaterial. You would probably, you know,
he's the guy to ask for all of the references of where to go to and where to look on the metamaterials, essentially, right? Because he was saying that he would give a list of different contacts, places and everything. Can you go into that a little bit more, Tim? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, so what I know is I was told that he had attended at least one APEC conference, so that lets me plug the conference a little bit more. And he said the feedback was he liked it. That was about it, you know. And then I know that he also attended the SCU, right? And that's the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. And I believe he attended that one in person. So he probably got more out of it than APEC. I don't know. You know, so it sounds like he has been kind of like learning about that community as well, you know, which is awesome. In terms of metamaterials, the person that I would probably point you towards might be Jeremy Reese, alien scientist. He's done probably the most research on this.
Yeah. No, I'm familiar with Jeremy.
Yeah. Well, Charles, I would, if you're going to pick somebody's brain, Jeremy is probably the best person to, yeah. And he's presented on it at APEC too, but I mean, he's probably the best person to talk with because he just did tons and tons and tons of research, you know?
Yeah. So I recently sent Mark some samples. So I'm not sure if he's received them yet, but he should get them in the next few weeks, in the next few days, I think. So.
And you've seen Mark's test setup, right?
Yeah, no, he's the one to be given the samples to. I gave samples to Jeremiah, and I should have given them to Mark too. I just got busy with work, so.
Mark.
No, at that time too, like you know, Mark was very busy with just trying to get Elzaphan set up, and setting up something like Elzaphan is a tremendous endeavor to undertake. There's so much equipment. It's probably like literally altogether maybe 7 to 8 tons of equipment, metric tons of equipment, which is just nuts. So the whole entire configuration, he had to get it set up. And now that he's finally been playing around with it, you know, when he did the APEC presentation live, that was the point at which he could basically just turn on the power supplies, turn on the signal generators, turn on the wave amplifiers, and then run with it, right? So this was probably the time to send it to him. It wouldn't have gotten lost in translation, and he can take that pretty easily. The question is, will he figure out how to actually compress those samples or put them into the waveguide so that he can look for these kinds of effects? Because he's not looking for charge influence right now. He's not looking for cyclotron motion of trapped electrons within a lattice like we see in LK99, which explains very well its behavior. It has a lot to do with that. In fact, the same stuff of Hudson involving monoatomics.
Well, so, I'm a tremendous fan. I'm a fan of all the work you guys are doing. I mean, you know, I'm just a talking head. So essentially, I'm just a meat puppet, right?
You're the best talking head, Tim. No one has ever hosted shows with more patience so far.
Tim, we need you. You're the best.
Like I have watched Tesla Tech, and I've watched all kinds of other conferences, and you know,
we're all just talking
was literally the opposite of you, completely intolerant, completely impatient. Estes Park is exactly what you're not, and that's what makes you perfect. That's why Mark said it within the first like few seconds of us looking at each other and saying, you know, we got to make this conference. He said Tim Ventura is the only guy that can host this. He literally called you out, man, like right there and then.
That's
I couldn't agree more.
Wait, is that metamaterial right there? What do you got?
I think so. This is see-through jelly aluminum that I've produced.
Get out! Oh, you gotta send that to me. Oh, you gotta send that to me.
And I've got a whole bunch of samples together. I'm going to be shipping Bob Greenier here in the next week or two. A nanotube thing that grew out of monoatomics.
Yeah, and Bob is a great person to test stuff like that.
And does Mark have? Here's some more of the clear jelly. This one was out of the zinc.
I know. So with Mark, he got that EPR rig, right? And you've seen that, and he just it's like he hit the road when he got that. I mean, it's just been he's been testing stuff, right? It's like every time I see him, he's got that graph on the screen.
Well,
this
does he have
is
that
copper EPR that's rig? Grown black crystals off of it.
That's awesome, man.
Does he have the EPR rig that he got from Hathaway?
No, just water.
Yeah, he has EPR set up. I think he has 2 rigs now, and I think the Hathaway one is the one that works the best. And he's been hitting that all summer. It's just like every time I see him, he's got the graph up on the screen.
Is that a mass spectrometer thingy, or does that sort of stuff, or what does that one do?
So the idea behind it, right? Because Mark's Mark's focus is basically resonant frequencies, and you're pinging the atom, and you're going to couple that to gravity, and so you need to hit that resonant frequency, and that may also be what caused levitation with the Hutchison effect, because that's really similar to what John was
You're
using.
bang on with that. I couldn't agree more with that's what is exactly going on.
And I've never heard anyone offer a good explanation for the levitation in Hutchison. I mean, like lots of people explain the jellification, but I've never heard anyone really explain the levitation.
I've got one for you, Tim, and then we can get into that at some point in a later date. I'm still working on a huge, all-encompassing theory where I've looked at a tremendous number of effects, and I've linked together some critically important ones, many of which are actually documented and have traceable paperwork, patents, and various other publishments. So we have a pretty good idea what's going on there now. And we're working towards trying to create machinery that can now reliably reproduce the effect and amplify it to a sufficient degree where we can now observe these effects pretty much with a push button type of operation.
You know, it's strange that I had a I don't even know if I should give this away. I'm gonna get in trouble.
Oh, just say a little bit.
Okay, so David Chester, Dr. David Chester, right? Who's like, he's like smart. I mean,
heck yeah, he is, man.
Yeah.
Chester's a genius.
Yeah. I mean, he's like, he's beyond genius. Like, you know, he's the genius's genius. He was chatting me today, and he was describing this theory, and really arcane stuff, right? But like serious, real, hardcore physics, right? And so he was talking about it for a long time. He was basically kind of brainstorming out loud, but he was also trying to explain what he did. At one point, he's like, I think that I can use, he's like, I think I see things that these physicists missed that explain Tom Bearden's work. And I was like,
for sure.
Whoa, that's full circle, right? Full circle. Like, but then there's this other part. If you could add Bearden's work to mainstream physics, which is what he's talking about, then that would probably reflect back on your stuff too, right? So
tremendously, absolutely. And I look at Bearden's work and his
Bearden.
ideas of scalar interferometry, and he was dead on right with that. Sorry, go ahead.
Tom Bearden did the MEG generator, no?
Yeah, Tom Bearden is the MEG, the motionless electric generator guy, but he's more well known for his idea of scalar interferometry and what that has to do with us in the propulsion field. And with the APEC conferences, Tom Bearden talked about a weird phenomena where electromagnetic waves focused across an area with a scalar potential where they're transmitted from can create distortions in the local refractive index and quote unquote bottle up or store up energy in the cross field where you have this sort of Fresnel zone interference from two different transmission sources. And this idea is directly related to warp drive because if you ever watch Star Trek, that's exactly what they're doing, is using scalar interferometry to create a warp bubble, quote unquote, around the craft, and then they're shifting the constructive and destructive interference zones to move along a certain tangent, which, because the phase velocity can be greater than the velocity of light, you can produce this superluminal type of translation in three-dimensional space-time. So he called it on that.
When you've heard of scalar, you're talking about the entanglement at like the quantum entanglement.
Well, no, not to do with quantum, but a scalar is simply an amplitude of some unit in some considered to be in terms of the mathematics an infinitely small point in space-time. Now, of course, these things do have an actual size and dimension and geometry, but just for the sake of scalar as it exists today in the mathematics that we're still using, it's an infinitely small point, and it just has
infinitely large.
What's that? Oh, it can't. Well, it is. In reality, it does have dimensions, but
yeah, Bernie, that's not the main. Sorry, I didn't give you the main page. Sorry, that's the. Bearden goes back. He goes back further than that, but a lot of those references take you back to the U.S. Psychotronics Association, which is what that is. So I thought I would drop that link in there. I guess that's a product page, but it's actually the main website. I didn't even know they had a website. I thought that they disappeared years ago. But so Jeremiah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, surprised me too. This is great.
Yeah,
Bernie, can you make sure that gets from the private chat to the?
Yeah, Tim posted it in the private chat, and that's excellent. Just showing out lots of Tim or Bearden's work, and one of the biggest things that stuck with me out of all of Bearden's presentations, works, and stuff was his talks on free energy and keeping the dipole, not breaking the magnetic field each time you tap the electrical vacuum or 0 point or whatever in your circuit. Essentially, the AC aspect breaking down the magnetic fields and having to reestablish it, all the energy that you're retaking and wasting out of it.
He was talking about the exterior. It's been a long time, but he was talking about the exterior of the circuit as part of the circuit, right? Wasn't that maybe?
Yeah, that it's a dynamic circuit as well. That you're a lot of the times it's like it's actually it's a closed running as a closed circuit, but you're able to have it as an open circuit, bringing more energy in and like going out sort of stuff.
So here's the weird part about it: the closed circuit aspect of this is super anti-intuitive because it is not a purely geometric aspect. So what's happening is
you have to have your load circuit, but then you can have other circuits built off of it, and that you have to look at it as a
load
higher
can be in the circuit.
Dimensional.
But let's go on beyond just the idea of the meg, right? Let's talk about what's actually happening and what property the meg is trying to utilize. The velocity of light has a finite distance over time, and this is the part that we're really taking a look at, because relativistically, if we transmit a stronger and stronger signal, if we recognize, and this goes beyond just simple relativity and goes into Einstein-Descartes theory, if we recognize that the energy mass equivalence has to do with the two variables in the refractive index called epsilon and mu, then we know that any energy that's radiated or that's concentrated in some kind of volume or area is going to have a direct reflection on the refractive index. And because that is what controls the velocity of light, what these devices are doing is taking advantage of a change in the velocity of light. Now, in practical human sense, a change in the velocity of light in some controlled volume, like the inside of a machine or its reactor, would be equivalent to us thinking about it as a temporal field, where the speed of time is flowing differently, but we don't need to consider like the velocity of light, because it's a lot easier for us humans to just consider time due to the fact that our brains have built-in mechanisms to measure time. So it's intuitive in that sense, and that's how I like to think about it, temporal fields. So in the case of the energy bottle in Bearden's work, the really important part is that the MEG uses a sort of energy bottle, but it constrains it to the core. And in the open work, where he talks about using 2 pulse klystrons to produce this energy accumulation in 3-dimensional space, it's the total stress energy of 2 different fields that both want to occupy the same epsilon and mu 90 degrees vectors so that they can be tangential to each other. But because they're coming in at angles to each other, the net sum of the stress energy is not 0. And so the only way that space-time can hold that energy is to physically slow down the velocity of light, or basically to slow down time in that region, so that the total photonic energy that leaves the local space where 2 waves are interfering with each other can account for the loss in the amplitude of those waves when they destructively interfere.
Are you saying that the waves are hitting each other, north and south, are smacking into each other?
Yeah, or at some angle too. North and north are going to be basically smashing into each other. Where you have waves that cancel out in phase.
I'm a little rusty on the MEG setup. Yeah. He has 3 coils on there. He has 3 arms on 1 core, 3 coils wrapped around the 3 arms. The 2 outer coils are being pulsed to smack into the center.
What the MEG tries to do is take the field from a permanent magnet and use flux switching coils to cancel out the spin of the wave.
Right, there's a permanent magnet in there also, right?
Right, and so it tries to switch back and forth the direction of the magnetic flux through the core by canceling out the field and creating constriction. And it's a temporal effect, and so he estimates that using this temporal displacement, where the pathway of a magnetic flux through the core becomes longer on one side where the field.
The magnetic flux of the magnet, not the magnetic flux of the inductor.
Right, with the magnetic flux of the magnet going through the core, the inductor core, is slowed down on one side or the other, depending on whether it's
by using the inductors.
by using the coils, the driving coils.
Right. The inductors coils, right.
And the secondary coils, the output coils, then pick up this change in magnetic flux and feed it back into the power supply that runs the driving coils. But his idea was if it's a temporal effect, the symmetry, the electrical symmetry does not have to be equal to unity because it's an open system. And by open, it means it's using the aether, or basically the refractive index, to extract additional energy through a temporal differential compared to the outside.
He's canceling the magnetic field of the magnet using pulses.
Right, canceling and then enhancing. So on one side it enhances, on the other side it cancels, and then it switches back and forth between those two sides because the core has saturation. And if you continue the field on one side, it's just going to saturate, so you won't get any more output from your pickup coils.
So he's amplifying the magnet's magnetic field.
It's switching it back and forth.
He's switching, which I think is kind of interesting, right? Because he's switching, basically switching a permanent magnet. So the permanent magnet is almost like a transistor. Would that be a way to consider it?
I think he's doing something like this, like inhaling a little bit and blowing out harder. That's what he's doing with the magnet as the air. The magnet is the air of the exhale of the magnet.
Think about it this way.
He's inhaling and pushing out, in a pulse, and slightly in, push out faster, with the coils, energizing the coils like that to push the magnetic field stronger through the existing magnet.
Well,
let's say there's a magnet in the core.
Hey, Mike, think of it like a magnetic valve. Imagine okay, so imagine that the core is like a hose and the magnetic field is like imagine that the core is like the hose and the magnetic field from the permanent magnet is like some fluid flowing through it.
Right.
So if you squeeze down on the hose, you're going to have less flow through one side, but if it's if the hose goes through a Y splitter and it can go to either side and it's equal, if you squeeze down on one side and you're going to have more flow through the other. And so what this thing is doing is, here's the thing. There's a property of any magnetic material, like the iron in the core of our transformer in the case of the mag, and it has this property called saturation. So what that means is as you put more and more magnetic flux into it, it can't actually contain it because the domains inside of its lattice are becoming more and more aligned. So at some point, all the domains that can move are going to realign and the magnetic field gets expelled. So what he does with the mag is he utilizes the fact that if he puts a magnetic field on some part of the core, it's going to oversaturate it, meaning that the field can't actually polarize the core, and so it gets expelled. And that basically makes the core act as if there's a gap in this solid metal segment where these pieces of metal, one containing the magnetic flux of the magnet and the other one containing the coil, are separated. So if you move a magnet back and forth through a coil, it produces a flux. And in this case, he's moving the distance that the magnetic field has to travel from through the core to having to flow outside the core in order to make the connection on and off, in order to make it act as if a magnet is moving back and forth through the pickup coil. Does that make sense?
Slightly.
No, Jeremiah, that's good.
When I rewatch it for the third time, yes, it will.
It's been a while, right? This is one where Jeremiah would probably need to sit down with a schematic and or a schematic with a couple of different.
I like hoses and water.
Yeah, there's usually good analogs to find easy explanations for these things, and it's just a matter of finding that right example that kind of hits all the audience.
Yeah. Maybe there's like an image schematic you could find for the mag.
I'm sure there is. I'm not too worried about the mag anyway. It's not the most effective way. There are more open systems that utilize directly coupling with the background, and those I would consider tremendously more than I would consider a core type system. Although cores are a lot easier, they do allow lower energy translations like this. But.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I need to hit the road, but thank you for having me on. And Bernie, just send me. I mean, next time you guys are doing these shows, I might be able to pop back on later, but right now I have to.
Call if we're still going, by all means, and thank you for being here, Tim.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me, sir.
Thank you for the update. Here is Tim's main YouTube channel, Tim Ventura Interviews, where you can find all of his ridiculously epic news updates on metamaterials, on UAP, UFOs, consciousness, all sorts of things. Posting it for everybody in the live chat right now.
I gotta say, man, that is a classy banner. Like, I'm not gonna lie,
thank you.
It's a classy looking banner.
I know. Not just that, look at the amount of work this guy does every single, well, maybe it's usually every day, but some days there's multiple. I guess you have to take days off too. You have to work and live your normal life too, but look at that. There's at least 10 new ones a month, not including APEC as well.
Oh, yeah.
Tim
Well,
does so much. It's insane.
you know, and really my goal there, I don't have an amazing goal. I just wanted to have thoughtful conversations. That was it. That was literally where it started, because I worked in real estate for a long time, and that industry doesn't have thoughtful conversations. So I was like, I got to use my brain for something. But I wanted to have thoughtful conversations, and I love talking about technology and innovators, and so it just kind of started from there. And I have some interesting ones coming up actually, but lately, especially like if you go up towards the top, and I don't know if this will help anybody, but what I've been really trying to do is get like background info to help with this UAP story, because it seems like the story is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And like I had David Brin and Kevin Newth, and and then I just did a couple more on it, and so I'm trying to get Robert Zubrin. I had Robert Zubrin on, and I'm trying to just get background info that helps people, just basically make their own decisions, right?
Every episode is just a rabbit hole of knowledge discovery and cutting edge, like intellectual discussions on technology and physics and all sorts of stuff. Your
channel is too. Your channel is too. It's all
very parallel. Exactly. That's why you're perfect fit here. This is Tim's After Hours, where he comes to unwind and have a good time. It's awesome. Thank you, Tim, for being here.
Yeah, there's a show idea if anything ever gets boring, Tim.
Well, gentlemen, thank you once again. I have to bail out, but you have a great evening. I will try and come back if I'm able to.
Later, Tim.
Oh, that's
See you, Tim.
Why. Oh, there's another Asian Pacific copying your acronym. My goodness, unsubscribe. Jeez.
Well, and Mr. Esoteric, I know that you've got to go sooner than some of us too. So if you wanted to talk about some of your recent work,
you wanna please do.
I was going to ask Jeremiah. Did you receive the samples, the 2 samples I sent you?
Yes, I received the 3 samples. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, 3. That's right, and the uranium ore. Cool.
Yeah, so I'm going to be setting up experiments to see if I can, quote unquote, charge that stuff up, and if it'll actually, be still active after some period of time. So right now I've got them separated, so that one can kind of decay back down.
Yeah, so people know this is the stuff that was on this. It was with the uranium ore, and yet they had mined out most of the uranium ore, and this was the stuff that was coming out slowly, like over, say, a year. It would grow like 3 inches, it looked like, and it was starting to actually curl in some areas because it was like almost like foam, but a lightweight powder that was coming out of the rock that I've never seen before, and it was mixed with the uranium, like right in with the uranium. So I don't know. I think it has something to do with the uranium, and I don't know. We'll find out. I gave some to Mark also. And then what else? Oh, then I gave you I think it's a monatomic sodium, which is, I looked it up, and it's a monatomic monocation, which I'm still learning about. And so who knows? But yeah, you can have some fun with those, and we'll see what goes on.
I love that.
Yeah, that's what you got it labeled here. M-state sodium ?
Yeah.
It does
Yeah.
look really good though. I mean, this stuff is about as bright as printer paper. So
Yeah. So I did the tests on it too, and it would not, when you heated it up under inert gas, it did not change, didn't melt away. Slowly, it started getting smaller over the 2 hours. Like it started evaporating out when I took the lid off, but so slowly that and then I put acids to it, very concentrated boiling acids to it. And so I don't know. I think it's most likely some highly monoatomic. It came out of the process while I was making monatomic gold. And so but it's not the gold because I weighed it all out. And so most likely it's a sodium, because otherwise it couldn't be anything else. There's nothing else but sodium, gold, and hydrochloric and nitric acid. So anyway.
Well, we'll find out what it does after I slam it with my most potent radioactive elements and see if this thing, sort of charges up.
We are back in 5 minutes. Sorry, guys, just stepping out for a smoke. But I'll be listening.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, what else were you going to do with it?
Well, once I understand its properties, as far as the theory that we have operating now that seems to explain most of all the effects that we've seen from various scientists, energy accumulation in localized matter in any form has a direct effect on space-time. And so if it can accumulate energy, especially if it still remains radioactive, then it should also change mass or change its inertia or show some kind of a gravitational field surrounding it as a result of its higher energy density for the same amount of mass.
Do you have a way of weighing it while you're doing these experiments?
I do, yes. And I have several pieces of instrumentation that it'll extend this experiment out to a pretty long period of time, because I'll have to charge it up and do each experiment separately while exposing it to radiation and the gamma.
What are you weighing it with? I mean, how are you weighing it? I don't get it.
I have a Fisher scientific scale with 4 digits of resolution underneath a gram. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I can weigh 0.1 milligrams is my finest resolution, and that I can expose that live and see how it changes.
Yeah, and once you do some experiments with it, for several weeks or months, you can then technically. Do you have a furnace?
I have ways to heat it, but I don't have a dedicated furnace.
Okay, so then you could technically, I don't know if you have chemistry stuff. Later, I hope to plan on taking some of it and refining it, seeing if I can actually because there's a little bit of, what's it called, sand in it, or something that's a little bit grainy, but and I think it's the sandstone that it comes out of, that I accidentally got some in. But yeah, so I might refine it, and I might actually distill it, because if you evaporate it at hot temperatures in a closed environment, you can actually get the monatomic particles to actually float up and condense over to another chamber.
Get out of here, really? So how do I make that happen with this stuff if I wanted to do it?
Well, you got to have the right glass setup, which you can just you can buy some of this stuff for. I
have a pretty good distilling setup. I actually have 2 of them.
Okay. Just make sure that they're tight, that they're sealed with grease, and just if you have to, if you have to buy some whatever parts you're missing. This is not something you want to technically jimmy rig and then realize, it ruined it or something.
Yeah. So what do you put this stuff in? I'm guessing you don't just simply put it in the bottom of a round bottom flask or something like that.
I don't know. I'm new to the thought. I'm still coming up with ideas myself. So
I guess what I was asking is, do you use some kind of a solvent, or are you going to try to actually thermally evaporate this stuff directly as a powder?
I'll take some of it and thermally evaporate it, and then I'll take some of it and filter it just through I don't know, maybe some distilled water, and then I'll take some of it and put the concentrated hydrochloric and nitric acids to it to see if it breaks down any further. So I just haven't had time to do these tests yet. So, but yeah, and so but I'll be excited to hear from Mark, because he has machinery that technically could hopefully allow it to lose weight. But anyway,
Well,
so
you'll have to prompt him and remind him because he's got his hands full with way too many things, and you're going to need to tell him several times to get on this project and use this material, play around with it, maybe have some.
So what is the
suggestions on what you
machine
should
that
do.
Mark has? And sorry, I'm still stepping out for smoke.
He's
but
got a
I'm listening.
CNC machine, so he can make metal
But
parts and wave
I
guides.
need a mother freaking what? I always forget the word. I said it earlier. The machine that breaks down and tests what the atoms are. A mass spectrometer. This looks like some red. That looks like some red state stuff, and I really want to get it tested along with the white monatomics.
hey, Bernie, I have 8% on my phone. I can go plug it in. Never mind. Yeah, so go take your.
We love having you.
Yeah, go take your smoke break. Come back, man. But hey, Jeremiah.
Yeah, dude.
I was thinking that that superconductor that they're talking about, the LK99.
I can tell you all about it. What do you want to know?
Well, did you see that video recently where I forgot what his name. He's a young scientist guy. He does YouTube videos. He's
Michael
pretty
Brown?
good. I'm not sure, but he said that maybe there was what's it called, an iron, a little iron in it, and that's what caused it to.
Oh no, he mentioned that, and I know that some percentage of the audience was going to hear that part when he was doing his presentation and say, okay, well, it's contaminated, right? Because he said it may be contaminated with something that was ferrous.
Right.
No, that's not actually what it's doing. So it's an interesting material. The lattice structure is able to trap electrons that fall under the magnetic flux, and they undergo cyclotron motion, and they can't be displaced any farther than the lattice is repelling them. So because they're trapped in a cyclotron loop, they would have to be displaced farther in order for the energy to be equal, and therefore they repel. And so you basically have this state where you don't really have much for the diamagnetic properties until the magnetic flux saturates all of the various pathways, and then you get these constrained free electrons that are circulating around the loop. So this is the same kind of effect we see with monoatomics too in weight loss. And
yeah, when you talk about that right there, it just reminds me of something that happens when you're pulsing an inductor with a core for a long period of time. That core, I would beg to differ that the core seems to be ringing on its own after a while.
Right
I've heard a
on.
lot of reports of that. It's a very common thing involved in systems claim to produce additional output.
Because I would have a transistor ringing it for a while, maybe days or weeks. And it seems like, I've made a lot of cores, electromagnetic cores, and a lot of the cores, but it seems like the cores that are oldest, that I've used the most and have run the longest, are the easiest ones to get to self-oscillate after, it just seems to just keep triggering itself or triggering the transistor somehow after you're not triggering it. I don't know how to say this.
Well, let me ask you then, what's the composition of the cores that you've seen this effect most prominent in?
Hey, so Mike.
Okay, I'll tell you right now. Particularly the cores that were made out of low carbon steel.
So are these laminated cores or solid cores or what?
BB gun pellets, shotgun pellets that are soft iron, low carbon. I heard from another, what you would call a guru in the science community. I don't remember all the names, but the guy sat down with Tom Bearden on discussions before, and he mentioned that for a better radiant spike, you want to use low carbon steel.
So did you take these soft pellets from the inside of shotgun?
No, I ordered them off online, a bag of soft shotgun pellets.
And how did you turn them into a core? Because now you got
a plastic spool. I ordered plastic spools You know, they're round in the center, and I would sit them on the table flat on some wax paper, drop the pellets in there, and fill it in with epoxy until wait for it to cure.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Epoxy is the answer. Wow.
Hey, Mike, what do you do for a living?
Property management, but like by trade, I'm a high voltage industrial electrician.
Oh, cool. Electrician, right on. Yeah, I've never met you, so yeah, cool. Mike,
Oh no, that's badass though that you work with high voltage, because I've calibrated for high voltage distribution testing facilities, and I've also done work on connecting and disconnecting grid tie connections from the main distribution lines to local substations for like paper plants and things like that. So we worked on the switchgear and the transformers.
Yeah.
So you know all about it. You're the guy that would come out and probably turn the crank.
Oh yeah. Well, I've been zapped so many times. I'm used to it.
Exactly. You do get used to it too.
I don't like anything over 120. It's not tasty.
No. Well, yeah,
It's not fun.
You have all kinds of fun stuff that happens in the experimental side of things, where mysterious voltages can accumulate, but a lot of it's electrostatics and it's short-lived, so it's more of a surprise than anything.
So, hey, Mike, do you have any like machines or tools or gadgets from your electrical experience that you use for your projects?
I found this thing online, a circuit online called the poor man's desulfator circuit.
Yes.
Which you've heard of this? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I built one. I have one that will desulfate a massive. What is it like?
Yeah, they're very
one of the largest
interesting.
commercial Cummins engine Dodge diesel batteries that you find in consumer vehicles. So it'll desulfate one of those in just a matter of hours, and it uses a microwave oven transformer with a 380 amp MOSFET to switch it off of a DC 16-volt power supply. And when the back EMF kicks back out,
How would you like a circuit that can switch with just capacitors and a rectifier?
If it does the same job, then that's great.
It will take the grid frequency of 60 hertz, and it'll double that. It'll cut the bottom half of the sine wave off, leaving you with, you got the two hoops. So you'll have, instead of a sine wave, you'll have this.
All right, so you have a rectified DC pulse wave.
No coils here, and this way of creating a DC power supply basically is what it is. It's a DC power supply.
Is it the capacitor and full wave bridge system?
If you've ever bought a DC power supply before, what's the first thing that goes wrong with these power supplies?
Most often the switching transistors.
Or the inductor burns out.
Oh, for computer power supplies, yes.
Yeah, DC I'm talking about. DC power supply.
For DC power supply, a lot of times because of bad line filtering and pollution in the electrical distribution network, the filters have to work a lot harder than they should be working.
The switching device burns out. The inductor burns out. You'll be buying them every 6 months if you don't, rate them for your device that you're loading it with. But anyway, if you use a circuit with just the capacitors and a rectifier, there's a circuit out there. You don't have to have an inductor or a transistor to worry about burning out, and it's a reliable source of DC power that you never have to rebuild it, or it'll run. You can't burn it out either.
Yeah, but the only catch that if you plug it into line voltage, you'll have 165 to 170 volts peak to peak. So I also used that. It was invented by that guy. He posted a great PDF where he used it in his camper van to restore all kinds of batteries, and it also works really well. I use that for conditioning.
You can use an inductor also, but they get hot, and
Well, here's the thing I want to tell you about this other pulse supply. So it's based on the Bedini Energizer circuit, and this other pulse system, unlike the capacitor and full wave bridge rectifier scheme, which does work really well, but it also generates a lot of extra heat, because once the battery becomes conductive, more current flows due to the capacitor, the resistance inductance network, or excuse me, the resistance capacitance network. So here's the thing with the pulse system, you're only
You got to
controlling how
size your
much energy you
capacitor right for the battery. That way, that doesn't happen.
Well, right, but still, I mean, we're talking about speeds that are at least 10 times faster than that, and the batteries don't get hot. In fact, what it does is it converts the extra sulfation back into a highly energized state in the acid. So instead of just desulfating,
What frequency are you at? Your high frequency here?
Well, no, it's per pulse. So don't think in terms so much of frequency like a tuning fork, but think in terms of the rise and fall time of each individual pulse having some amplitude. And so we're just making really fast rise and fall so that the electron pressure trying to get from the cathode through the electrolyte into the anode busts off sulfation when those charged particles slam into the anode.
You talking about the Bedini circuit?
It's like the Bedini circuit. It's basically using the same principle. It's just generating a very fast and very powerful high current back EMF by using
using the microwave transformer.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
using a microwave transformer, primary coil for
Right.
ferromagnetic iron saturation.
You went for a bigger flyback.
Yeah, using a microwave oven transformer as a flyback is not exactly conventional, but I'll tell you what, it gives you a nice several hundred amp pulse at several hundred volts.
Be careful. Be careful.
It'll kill you if you screw up with it, but it will also desulfate a diesel battery.
So hey, when you're saying when you're talking about the microwave part, it's not creating microwaves; it's just creating voltage, right?
Yeah, this is the microwave oven transformer.
Yeah, but a microwave coil has a lot more turns and it creates a lot higher voltage, a lot more voltage, higher voltage. But not, you're not pumping it with amps, Jeremy, right? You're just limiting the amps. You're just getting the voltage in there.
Well, I'm giving it both. I'm feeding it both amps and a crap load of voltage. It has
about how much amps?
So on one side, what did I measure that thing at? I think it was somewhere around like 280 amps that I was getting on the low side, and on the high side, and the 280 amps it's got to cut off at right around 600 volts. And so the other side, I can get pulses well over 3 to 4 kV on the high voltage end, and the inductance slightly slows the signal down, so it's a little bit out of phase. But if I want,
but these are short pulses. You're doing this. So
they're very short pulses. Yeah. So let's say somebody had a solar farm and they had a big battery bank that was sulfated and it wasn't working right. Well, I can use the high voltage side, the secondary, using the same primary feed and the large MOSFET switching.
You're up around 30,000 watts there, no?
Impulse wise, yeah. I mean, you're talking a crap load of joules for the capacitor discharge through that circuit. But
would you say your voltage was again? 1,500 volts?
You can get over 3 kV on the
3K and
3 to 4 kV. I've seen spikes that were higher than that, but I've never really tried to measure the voltage exactly because it wasn't the critical factor. What I wanted to do was be able to take somebody's 160 or 170 volt storage bank with a bunch of series batteries and treat it as one single battery and desulfate the whole damn thing.
That's kind of rough with your wires in between each battery. Got to be.
No, it doesn't matter. It'll transfer right through.
Really?
No problem. It'll desulfate the whole freaking bank.
Oh, right, because you're pulsing at a short pulse. You're not heating up.
That's right. It's volts per meter, and it translates through those wires like a fiber optic cable.
You get around all that bad wiring problem that people do.
Exactly.
You're not. So you got amps and you got volts up there real high, but you got your pulses are like what, a nanosecond.
They're a little bit long. I mean, they have some segments where you could almost call it nanosecond rise time, but for the most part, the wave follows
millisecond.
What is it, like a semi-parabolic but generally sinusoidal curve, and you're talking about maybe about 50 to 250 nanoseconds. It depends on the load impedance too, because the inductor has to return all the energy that was past saturation from the ZPF back into the inductor, because it hasn't moved physically, so it's still in the same position. It's all got to come back.
What's the transistor you're using for this?
Oh man, I do not remember exactly what the number is, but I am sure I can find it and email it to you. It's
a high-end transistor.
Oh yeah, it's an IXYS 6th generation hex FET with like something over 380 amps rating at a few hundred volts. Yeah. So
not cheap.
No, they're about $16 a piece.
16 a piece.
They may be more now. I haven't looked in years. Or they could be cheaper. Who knows? I mean, there's probably better stuff out there now, even than those.
Well,
Jeremiah.
that's a lot of amperage for that price. That's pretty good.
It does its job. Yeah, go ahead.
Before I go, I was going to say, so the superconductor that everyone's talking about, the LK99, it was making me think how, if this one doesn't work, then I think they should try, mercury and antimony, because, in the alchemical literature, and what I've used, supposedly antimony is the most universal or is the greatest solvent for gold, and you basically have to do it with the furnace. And if you look at some of the information from what's it called, Hitler, or at least whoever was supposedly creating the let's see, what's it called, a mercury vortex engine for
the Dyke lock, and then you've got the other stuff too.
So supposedly that was what they were doing, was actually melting, doing something. They might have been dissolving the antimony and mercury in chemicals first, but then technically I think they were just melting them together like the alchemists would do, and then it would basically make a lot of the atoms don't actually bond, they actually just separate each other. So you got all these single atoms of gold in there. And yet, if that's the case with mercury and antimony, then you could create, if you do it 50-50 mole wise, then you would maybe get a high concentration of monatomic monatomic mercury, which technically.
Oh, I love that you said uranium there, because we were going to go into that. I need to mix thorium into that.
Yeah, so basically, my hypothesis is if they do it right, the mercury will turn red. It'll be, and the antimony, you can actually wash out with water, supposedly. So in other words, that the antimony that doesn't dissolve doesn't get used up, most of it comes back out. So basically, I'm thinking it might turn the mercury red, but
holy
it's just
shit, man. What is it going to take to convince you to do this experiment?
Yes, please.
Well, I don't have, like I said, a fume hood, and that is what you need for that experiment. So until someone has a way to get the air away from them, you don't want to be trying that experiment. But red mercury, if that created red mercury, that'd be pretty damn cool.
Yeah, it would be. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, but anyway.
We got purple and red right here.
What do we got?
Purple and red state. Purple, this gold. This was gold that's turned straight to purple. It was white gold, white monoatomic, that turned to purple monoatomic after I let it sit out in the sun for about a week. And
well, I don't know.
This is red state zinc and copper mix.
Right on.
Crazy.
Hey guys,
it was still trying to make Ormus.
This is Ormus, essentially. Ormus,
I mean, like just out of gold though, like straight.
Yeah,
out
pure
of sea
monoatomic gold. Yeah, that's exactly how I made this one. It was white.
Why the uranium? What's that? What do you need that for? You trying to make monatomic uranium?
All sorts of stuff. Esoteric Gold. Thank you, brother, for joining us. If you're popping out, but love you and all that you do, and we need to plan a full episode ASAP of Adeptelkhemist, and stay for as long as your phone lets you, or that you're able to, brother.
No, my phone's fine. I'm just it's late, but yeah. So Esoteric Gold on YouTube. So that's my channel. Anyway, we'll talk soon, guys.
Okay. Let me try to.
Hey, Steve, we will talk soon. Let's do some experiments
before you go.
Sounds like you're using
You've got
something
two channels, right? Oh, here we go.
Sodium hydroxide.
Yeah, no. Today I'm using my my other YouTube channel. It's not Esoteric Gold. I forgot anyway.
Right, because you got two channels. There's this one where you do have a few of your few videos.
Yeah.
I guess that's your new one. But you have another channel with a bunch more.
Yeah, it's the capitalized Esoteric Gold. So anyway, you guys rock. We'll see you guys soon.
As do you, brother. Thanks for joining us, my friend. We will see you on the next one. No, not this one, but why not? We'll see. Where's
You can
the
make this
set?
with
Here
heat
we
also.
go. Sorry?
You can make the monatomic with just heat, with kiln, with a kiln.
Heat and acid. There's lots of different ways through electrolysis and through different chemical reactions.
I'm only
Yeah.
familiar with the sodium hydroxide. The pH way.
Well, there are many, and I think I've pretty much rediscovered this electrolysis, electrical way, just through a little bit of salt water to do it with a little voltage. But here is Esoteric Gold's Ormus and monoatomics, and he does his through both heat as well as through chemistry and chemical reactions and the old alchemical process ways. But yeah. Still there? Still with us, Jeremiah?
What I understand about the
JP,
monoatomics,
you are muted.
you got to get the salt. You got to, like they say, you got to kill the salt to get it to release the energy. It's energy. And when you destroy the salt with pH, and the salt is alkaline, and you raise the salt is alkaline, I think, and you raise the pH with the sodium hydroxide really fast, and the salt dies, because it can't stand the pH shift, and it turns into the white milky substance that you see.
Yeah, and that process is like you're mostly getting the sea salts Ormus out of it, or monoatomics, as opposed to the specific pure elements that I'm getting off of the anodes, breaking down off the anode side of the metal, pure metal. But yeah, it's a decent way if the sea salt is pure and like the water you're using is pure, you can get some decent Ormus out of it though. Shout out Diet Dazzle, good day. Only Truths, Troy, Paul Nielsen, Somewhere in Time, Internet Person, Anthony Williams. Jeremiah, are you back yet? Mystery Eon, morning. I guess.
Yeah, I'm here.
There we are. Did you have any experiments you wanted to show today, or anything you want to go over? Or because
sure.
I do. That's yes. Before I show some other stuff. Okay.
I'll just go ahead and click on that link. Go on with my other device, and hopefully I can catch it in time so it doesn't echo.
The goal is to create fires with scalar waves, aka the flame in the mind. Being able to be like, start that fire with your mind.
Just logging into the phone so that I can show a couple of quick things.
They find these ancient smelting sites here and there, and they say they were making monoatomics there, like high up in the mountains.
I've heard that too in a lot of places, Mike, 100%. And it wasn't
little burn sites,
Yeah.
Was this this looks like Vinnie Vincent channel, no?
Yes, sir. You know it. I did want to cover this
for a while.
before the show is end. All three of us, indeed. Great work. And we're going to get him on a show here very soon. But here is Jeremiah with the other device. And we'll get back to that later. Vinny's been doing absolutely great, aka Roy. But we'll cover that before today is done. Which Jeremiah do we need? That one, and then get rid of this one, and then go like this, I think, and turn
Hey,
the
Jeremiah,
phone
you in
sideways,
there?
and we're good. And you can unmute because I don't know.
Yeah, there.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Hold on with that.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to be getting into doing some laser interferometry experiments, and I wanted a better way to visualize the beam paths and calibrate the system. So I was just playing around with this idea. I took one of these like Posh vapes, and I converted it into a miniature smoke machine. And inside I've got a tiny little pump. So you press the button, and it just sits there and pumps out smoke, which is pretty awesome. So it works really well for doing photonics experiments. You can visualize the beam path and check your focus points. It also produces this really cool kind of ground hanging fog. And I put this thing in the refrigerator earlier just to look for this effect. And this is useful if I'm looking for, say, impulse gravity generation or looking for waves on the surface of something. I can just fill the chamber with this sort of ground hanging fog. A little difficult to get it to vortex up, but yeah. So this is one of the new little tools, and I was thinking this is not actually a product on the market, and it probably should be. So I may very well consider manufacturing something like this because I think people could use it, especially in the scientific community.
What if gravity doesn't affect fog?
Gravity should affect mass, and if I apply acceleration or make that fog move or vibrate with acoustic waves, we know that phonons, for example, have a negative motion, so they are technically gravitational,
Mass.
just sound wave traveling through atmosphere. And so
And if gravity's an electric phenomenon, then is mass?
Well, gravity is an electromagnetic phenomenon. It's not purely electric. It's not purely magnetic. So technically, there is no such thing as magnetism. It's just the electric field viewed from 90 degrees or an orthogonal stationary position. But nevertheless, yeah, it is technically electric, but it's electric plus length contraction phenomenon, the Lorentz transform. And so all those things together, then you can explain gravity because it does have a change in the refractive index. We have to consider that the vacuum or the aether is a physical medium through which these waves move and translate.
Is the medium.
It's the medium, exactly. It has real physical properties, and they affect the phase and the interaction of various forces, charges, and the inertia of particles that are in motion or physical masses that are in motion. They also change the redshift and blueshift of electromagnetic waves, which, if you think about it, like the evidence for this fact is everywhere in astronomy, where we recognize that from distant star systems through gravitational effects that we can redshift and blueshift waves. So there has to be a justification for it. But relativity falls a little short in giving us a full explanation of how these effects come to be. And here we have a model where we can actually understand that completely to the point that we can synthesize it and build machines that make this effect happen.
You've heard of Ralph Ring?
Oh, yeah. Quite familiar with Ralph.
You know what he did with a hummingbird? He said he dissected the hummingbird and found that the vocal chamber had 2 holes in it. And he realized that the huge chest of the hummingbird was what was compressing the vocal chamber, like squeezing it, just like Tom Bearden's device.
Wow.
And that the 2 holes was pumping air. I'm not sure if it was in 2 directions or the same direction, and making 2 separate resonant sound waves or pulses. And so the hummingbird wasn't actually moving air with its wings. It was moving its chest muscles to push the vocal chamber and create the two tones.
Wow, I had better take a look into that a lot more deeply. I don't know if you had a link to any works there that you could pump in the private chat.
You know, that's the whole thing. I remember things that are like that, you know. I just never forget stuff like that. It was in one of his videos on YouTube, lectures, longer ones he had, you know. And one of the things I remember is his research with the hummingbird. And that was made perfect sense because, you know, I've seen hummingbirds up front, you know, in New Mexico and Colorado. And those things are not using air, man. Okay? You could see that they're not using air to travel. So they were definitely using you see, sound can be translated into energy through, you know, because it's just a signal wave.
Absolutely.
Sound.
A trapped phonon or a high concentration of motion along a tangential axis to the gravitational field of the massive body will directly relate in a weight loss of the sample. In fact, we've even seen this effect just by heating a sample up, by increasing the temperature and therefore the Brownian motion inside of almost every single material that we've looked for. The weight becomes slightly less as a result of it containing heat. And in the conventional mathematics, the effect is thought to be so small it's almost unobservable. But I'm doing this with equipment that's widely available in most laboratories that measure mass at all with any kind of precision. And so these effects are very viable, and it tells us the mathematics is wrong, or I wouldn't be observing these phenomena with temperatures that are only maybe about 60 to 80 degrees difference from room temperature.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that when you heat something up, you reach, you know, you change the properties of it. Yeah.
Right, and it's just because you have now this extra motion, this kinetic motion, on along a different axes, and it's greater than the motion of the surrounding mass that's making the gravitational field. So that slightly changes the alignment. So the phase angle and the coupling coefficient of that affected hot mass versus the gravitational field of the Earth's mass, in our case, those things don't couple to each other strongly because of the greater velocity, and it's a relativistic length contraction effect, and it's happening with so many trillions of individual protons, neutrons, and electrons at once that these effects can cause a weight loss as measurable on a precision balance. Did we lose you, Mike?
No, I'm here. I'm listening.
Ah, looks like you're a ghost.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done experiments with heat, but it makes sense. And even in the opposite direction with cold as well.
Yeah, you also get effects there too. And phase transitions also cause other effects, like the phase transition between water's liquid and vaporous state. So you'll lose some weight when water goes into its vaporous state. And that's something that we've also observed to a pretty reasonable degree. Vapor density being a direct correlation with the weight loss. Seems like that when water vapor is in a suspended state where it's just, you know, condensed, or it's uncondensed in, you know, higher humidity, that it doesn't seem to weigh anything according to the scale. And it's a small percentage, yeah, compared to the total water mass, but it's still fascinating that we don't measure a weight from it. Wax vapor too, by the way, also does this. So nobody's really seen this effect so far. It's been pretty much fail-forward research. Wayne and myself doing this stuff. He's the one that came up with this idea. He found through very meticulous investigation and a tremendous amount of patience that I don't possess. He was able to observe these effects in the first place, and then when he told me about them, I'm like, okay, I have to replicate all of these things. So him and I have done like probably 15 collaborations or more, just replicating these various effects. And the really important ones he's posted on his channel. He's done videos about them.
And that was with heating up the water.
Heating up water, heating up wax, various other samples. We've also seen the same kind of effect by magnetizing and allowing to decay a certain sample. And so lots of different ways basically to impart some form of energy into something that's made of matter. And then we see the weight loss, which just tells us, mass energy equivalence, right? You put energy into something that's stored or trapped for a period of time, so therefore its mass goes down because its energy goes up. The mass energy equivalence isn't the conventional simple flat space-time, but they're exchangeable. So as you increase the mass, you decrease the energy, or as you increase the energy, you decrease the mass as they see each other in their isolated frames of reference. That's how all this works. It's almost like buoyancy in terms of gravitation. It's almost an effect like buoyancy. But instead of being buoyant in air, like a balloon, this buoyancy has to do with the density of the background field.
The buoyancy of the ether.
Exactly, the buoyancy of the ether. It's something that hasn't been really looked at thoroughly, in my opinion, and it goes back hundreds of years. So, it's time for us to start seriously considering this model.
I mean, when I think of the ether, I'm thinking the highest denominated value for a voltage you can not imagine. It's not in our numbers. We run these Tesla coils at what, a couple 100,000 volts, maybe a couple million volts.
Yeah, I've probably not peaked over 3 million volts.
What is this? These Birkeland currents. These lightning bolts that are millions or billions and trillions of years old, and they're still as the size of a whole universe. But they look like stars to us, today. They're still there, and they're absolutely bigger than our entire universe, and they're older, and they're still lightning bolt. It's still bolting.
Well, let me just correct one thing, because I agree with almost everything you said except for the physical size comparisons.
Maybe that's what's filling up the ether with this potential.
Oh, it's helping tremendously. Yeah, the electric charge differential through the Birkeland currents does help tremendously, but keep in mind that they aren't actually that large comparatively. Like, these are a lot smaller than a galaxy, for example. For most of them, you have currents that thin out, they'll go into a cross.
I might be a little rusty on that.
But no, here's the thing. Anytime you have a scalar potential, which is something that Birkeland currents produce, and they nest scalar potential in the form of columns in that geometry between galaxies or between planets on a smaller scale, even within a star system. So you can have one star system and its star producing a Birkeland current between that star and another star system that's virtually imperceivable. But the truth is that all these systems have electric charge differentials, and they transfer these currents called Birkeland currents between them. And so you get all kinds of extra additional electric fields. And the key with electric fields is anytime you produce one, it will continuously propagate itself outwards at the speed of light until it reaches the ends of the universe. So you could say...
Well, you say electric field as if that it's coming without a magnetic.
Well, that's because the magnetic field is a misnomer. The magnetic field is simply the electric field at 90 degrees. And to cancel the electric fields have a direct effect on time.
So the magnetic field is a byproduct of the electric field.
The magnetic field is just the electric field viewed at 90 degrees. That's all it is. If say
at 90 degrees, so it's not the egg, it's the chicken. Which came first,
Exactly. Yeah. In this case, the electric field is the chicken. There's no question about it. There's not a chicken and egg situation.
Okay.
Magnetic field
Why
is the egg.
How can you say there's no question about that? I mean,
because we have the mathematics to prove it through experimentation, and based on the experiments that I've actually done and adapted from this new mathematics, the fact that they work tells me that this theory is applicable in a real world situation.
Well, looking at from the outside in, it makes sense that the electric field would be before the magnetic field, if you think about it a little bit.
Right, because a particle like an electron or a proton, they just
you got an inductor there. It's not going to have a magnetic field until you give it electricity.
All right, so like the proton and the electron, for example, they just have this constant positive and negative electric field that surrounds them. But if they're not moving, they don't have a magnetic field technically. But if you try to accelerate them in a given direction, relative to other surrounding matter, that other matter will see the field as either electric or magnetic. So imagine that you throw a baseball directly away from yourself.
Because you're creating a differential.
Right. Well, here's how you can look at it physically. This is what actually happens. So imagine that a charged particle is flying away from you, like you throw a baseball away from you. As the ball is moving away from you, you'll see the back end of that, the part that's moving away from you, as having a lesser field than it had before. So if it's like a negatively charged baseball, you're going to see that as being slightly less negatively charged. Maybe it's not one baseball charge, maybe it's now like half a baseball charge, depending on how fast you threw it. But in front of it, you'll see, if it's half a baseball charge for you, it'll be like 2 baseball charge for whatever's in front of it, because it'll compress the electric field in the direction that it was accelerated, due to the fact that the finite velocity of light only allows the field to propagate so fast. So if you push it through that, the speed of light's not going to change from the outside reference frame, and it compresses the electric field. Well, this is a stress on epsilon. And so if you look at that wave from the side, the electric field becomes stronger as it's passing your 0 point view. So if you're looking straight forward and the thing is coming from your right side and it moves towards you, right around the time where it crosses your center view, you see the field is becoming more and more of the same charge. So if it's positively charged, it's going to become more positive, negatively charged, become more negative. But right after it crosses your center view and it now is moving away from you, just like a Doppler shift, you know, an ambulance is going to go, woo, woo. Well, as it's coming towards you, you're going to, woo, woo, woo. So right at the center point, you're going to hear the Doppler shift. And in this case, the Doppler shift is the electric field intensity. That's where these effects come from, is the change in the electric field intensity, a red shift or a blue shift in the amplitude of the electric strength, depending on where this particle is coming from and where it's going, and your viewing point. This guy is awesome with his plasma stuff.
What's this whole thing about non-locality?
I'm still trying to figure that out myself, to be honest. I've talked to.
Well, I think I know what it is.
Oh yeah, dude, please. I've asked Boyd and is Yin Yang to explain.
Okay, because you just brought up the Doppler shift, and everybody refers to the speed of light. I tend to stick with Tesla's comments on vibration with just about everything, including light. I agree with the notion that light is not moving. You're just exciting the ether in that area to, just like you would excite a filament in a light bulb. So that's why the light is formed, because it's been the area where the ether has been excited.
Right, and importantly, we can recognize the mechanism for how to excite the ether using.
But how? I'm telling you how, through vibration.
Well, there's many kinds of vibration.
Not through momentum, through vibration. And because there's vibration, you have a focal point where the waves connect, the A and B. And let's say the vibration is coming from just one source. Well, eventually it's going to find something to bounce off, and then now you have A and B, right? Well,
right. So you have an interference zone. That's really where you want to interact these different wavefronts. So you're talking, it sounds to me like you're talking about primarily acoustic vibration.
Look, they already did experiments in the lab with sonillumination and with vacuum tubes, making little stars in a jar with frequencies of sound and
right.
and you know, sonoluminescence, sound.
Yeah,
so if you can create light with sound, if you can demonstrate that, which they have, that you can create light with sound, well, there's nothing moving there. That's all vibration. Why does vibration have to be a movement in our heads? Why can't movement just be a non-locality thing? And it's just vibration, and it's non-local. There's no locality in anything in the vibrational field. If you want to call the cosmic field energy of energy, the ether, and everything that exists in it, matter and all, is all part of this vibration. So where is what is this non-locality thing? What does it mean?
That's what I want to know is, what does non-locality have to say about the speed of light?
And maybe does it have something to do with the fact that vibration does not require movement or going from point A to point B, but it can simulate movement with light. It can make light move through the focal point. You can move the focal point in a sonoluminescent,
I've been talking to Iron
wave.
D Max
Wave.
here, by the way. Just interjecting quickly.
Just
What
like
I've
you would
got
move the
playing
ping
is-
pong ball with the same sound wave.
So are you saying non-locality is basically an explanation for our...
Now the ping pong ball is moving, but the wave that moves the ping pong ball is not moving. It's doing something different. It's called reshaping itself. And then by reshaping itself, it can move things inside the bands of its shape.
Right, you have constructive and destructive interference zones that, in the case of acoustic levitation, directly relate to pressure on the outside of whatever thing is being
It's the
affected.
same thing, same way you would move an iron ball through a tube using electromagnetic coils. The frequency, the sine wave going through the tube is not moving. It's not moving. It's
Well,
just
it's interesting
vibrating.
that you bring that up.
The ball is moving. The frequency making the ball move is not moving. It's vibrating. That's a fact.
Right. You also have.
It's an evidential fact. You can see that.
Right. You
That
also
e-
have these waves that do seem to move. So you can have, say, two different transmissions.
Oh no, they seem to move, but you know they're not moving. They're just shaped that way.
Well, right,
It's
because
no
technically
illusion.
the entire construction of the background field, because it is geometric and these points are basically fixed, like their relationship with each other, their magnetic moment, their position and spin, and their electric field polarization are directly correlated with all the other points. And so those points don't necessarily move, but the angle that they have in relation to each other, that does change, and so you have changing variable, C, due to the fact that the phase conjugation has to always be completely equal. So if two particles, say if two of these nodes, these matter-antimatter pair is known as positronium.
No doubt, energy can move matter. No doubt.
Absolutely. So if they're misaligned, they're going to take longer to realign before the full strength of the wave can be transferred, and that's going to be seen as a redshift or a blue shift. That tells us the physical geometry of the universe we can really do something with, because we have a matrix that we can directly affect with electric and magnetic fields, but we understand that the thing which affects it isn't just some static potential. It's a changing voltmeter or amperemeter, and the layering of these two fields is the critically important part.
The angle, the shift.
Right.
Couple questions in the live chat.
Okay, let's go for it.
Describe fixed relative to what? How it doesn't move, it repeats.
Fixed basically means this. Imagine that you're in a three-dimensional matrix formed of a bunch of two particle pairs that are sort of doing this chase of each other in a little loop. And if you take a cross-section of that loop, it looks exactly like the yin-yang signal, or the yin-yang imagery, by the way. So very fundamental, super old signal. People have seen it in visions, but if you map it out mathematically and through the modeling software, it looks exactly like a yin-yang, which tells us this is probably fundamental to the universe. So what the grid or the matrix that I'm referring to means is that physical space-time, as in the translation of all electric and magnetic signals from matter, has to travel through this grid by these points turning or spinning. And it forms a tetrahedral lattice where the only way to break that grid in terms of the symmetry, right? These points are fixed in tetrahedral arrangement, and you can't make one of these nodes move to some other point in the lattice. It's going to stay fixed in its position. unless one particular thing happens. You break the Schrödinger limit, as it's known as, and this particle-antiparticle pair separates and splits apart into matter-antimatter in a positron-electron emission that are 180 degrees apart. So that's the only way to break the lattice and reinsert a new point somewhere else different from where it came from by turning it into matter. Otherwise, the lattice stays structured. You're not going to change its physical shape or the relation to each point compared to other points. But you can change the distance. It's elastic. You can stretch it and squeeze it. So that's
You're talking about the lattice of the ether?
Yep, I'm talking about the lattice of the aether. That's the aether in a nutshell. It's this deformable superfluid-like medium. There are no losses in it. That's why the superfluid.
Of course, you can change the lattice of the ether just by vibrating, just
right,
like you would vibrate a lake with a pebble.
Right, but you're not changing the geometry of the lattice. That stays.
No, and you're not changing the geometry of the lake, but you are creating ripples in the lake.
Exactly, you're right. Exactly the same way, man. And you're brilliant for this stuff because I loved your comments the entire time, and you're a really smart guy. I've appreciated the fact that you're on here today. So let me just throw that out there.
Absolutely, Mike does. Pleasure to have you.
I cannot wait.
Well, if you stop thinking in the way that education teaches us, let me tell you something. I spent a lot of money, and I'm not saying anything bad about ITT. It's a great school. They pump some knowledge. Okay. But I disagree with something they did not teach us, which they should teach anybody that's learning electronics. Okay. Okay. So they had an agenda of teaching us to build binary clocks, wireless FM and audio, video transmitters, radios, and this is all military stuff. If you think about it, binary clock. What do you think that's for? That's for defusing bombs or making bombs, and wireless FM and video spy equipment and whatever, and component level stuff, and then but nothing that you would want to learn is that you would consider a cornerstone of the subject of electricity, and that is definitely an electromagnet. We never learned that once in 2 years, and 30 grand later. That's all I'm saying. And that's what I mean about education and how they get you thinking in a way they want you to think. Basically, is go back to work. Don't get esoteric.
ITT is a trade school, so that's what they're really teaching you is how to
teaching you keep the machine gears running.
Yeah, but in what
free of the machine matrix?
In what skilled trade platform today does not use an electromagnet?
Well, here's the thing. What you're pointing out here is a real problem in academia, and in fact, I would say it's.
And I'll tell you why they didn't teach us the electromagnet. Because when you build an electromagnet and you see what it does, you see what it does. You see what it's.
That's why they got rid of the dynamo.
Well, an electromagnet is a dynamo. It is the basic concept of a dynamo, and just about everything else that revolves around electricity can be understood in an electromagnet and how an electromagnet operates with a piece of iron and a copper wire wrapped around.
Professionals, the education system and professors are really up against a wall here because they've got to overcome a tremendous amount of misinformation. And the fact that this stuff is not
Pandora's box has been ripped open, and it's like some aren't going to be able to handle it and are going to be jumping off rooftops, and others are going to be diving head in, and the general population is.
Well, electromagnets are fascinating.
Everyone free will and getting exposed to it.
Yeah, the velocity of the electrons through the conductor too also have a tremendous effect on the strength of the electromagnet and what kind of field it generates. As the velocity increases, watt per watt, you get less magnetic field, but you get more of the electrotranslational field. And so these things act very strange. You get an additional scalar potential. This potential just comes purely from the velocity of the charged particles. But it's also unaccounted for in our mathematics, and it can generate basically spontaneous force that doesn't obey Newton's laws of motion because there's not an equal and opposite force. And the reason for that is in Newton's third law, all the systems that have equal and opposite reaction to each other
There's
must
always
be
going to be an
the same
equal and
line.
opposite force, no matter what you do.
That's what I'm saying is it's not. Well, here's the thing. Well, in the ether, yeah, in the ether, but it becomes
the ether is the equal opposite force of no
There
matter
you
what
go.
you do.
There you go. See, that's exactly
Whatever
right.
you do is never going to be greater than the ether. So there's your opposite force.
Right, but right now we don't have that in our convention, and so that's what we need to adapt. Is that the ether
That's
is
what
the opposite
CERN is
force.
doing.
Yeah,
They're
well, they
messing
have been
with the
making
ether.
breakthroughs, right? So
Concern.
CERN is the CERN is probably getting the ether to react more than anyone else to date.
It might be punching through that ether even and bringing other things through.
CERN is basically a huge electromagnet with both ends touching each other. It's a circle electromagnet.
It's a mofo. It's a portal opener, I think.
And they don't even have to smash particles together inside there. They could just turn on that electromagnet and let one particle of iron circle around in there. Eventually, they're going to create a vortex over their facility.
and it seems like they already have, based on those pictures, if there's any truth to those.
They say they're smashing particles together to view the explosion, right? Is that what it is for? I guess.
That is the official claim, trying to break down particles that are smaller than anything in physical.
Well, let me tell you something about
existence.
the Hadron Collider. Then. In theory,
Yes.
if they were just spinning a piece of iron molecule, few iron molecules in one direction around it, it is a big, huge wheel attached to planet Earth, is it not? It would create some kind of centrifugal force and maybe even steer Earth in a different direction within our cosmic space right now, by centrifugal
That's
force.
fascinating.
Just think about that. And they're just
Yeah,
telling you, oh, we're
definitely
smashing particles together. We're not
concerned.
actually creating a centrifugal machine. We're smashing particles together.
Yeah,
Right.
we're
You
not
never know.
trying to change the direction of space-time around Earth. No, not at all. We're not freaking ripping.
No, what I'm
each
saying is by spinning a
the
piece of
universe.
iron in a circle that is connected to the Earth, it creates centrifugal force. It can steer and pull the planet or push the planet, depending, or essentially force, both. With centrifugal forces, just circular motion. So just doing that alone will give you lift. So if you have that going on with CERN and they're spinning iron gas in there, creating centrifugal force in such a huge wheel, in theory, they would be, pushing the planet or moving the planet with centrifugal force.
Jim Dillinger actually lives in France. Are you close to the CERN up in the Alp border by chance, Jim? Or can you go visit it one day or a couple days? Apparently there's crazy sky phenomenon constantly above CERN, and it makes all sorts of like plasma rings and like portal looking things in the sky.
And if there's any phenomenon over the facility, they're not just smashing particles together, because that would be
right,
going
like
in one direction. You're not going to get centrifugal force like that. But if you're going in two directions, smashing particles together, you're canceling out centrifugal force that way. You're not going to get any anomalies above it as far as vortex fields are concerned. You're not going to get spiral motions by smashing particles together, but you will get spiral activity above the facility if you're spinning something in one direction in the tube. Eventually, you would get spiral actions or vortex formations above the facility. If you're seeing anything like that, then they're probably not smashing particles together in there. They're doing it. They're trying to create weather control.
make
Maybe?
the portal.
I don't know.
Nah, gentlemen, I'm sorry, I've got to run. Time for me to finally have dinner.
I don't work there, so I don't know.
All right, brother. Jeremiah, you got to run.
Yeah,
well,
I do. Mike, I definitely want to talk with you more. I'd like to, give you a call sometime and let's talk about the physics of this stuff. You have a particularly sharp way of considering these things. I think it's a really down-to-earth way. And what I don't hear coming from you is a bunch of pollution from the academic system. So it seems like you've really come to these things on your own accord. And that means that you're basically a neutral point to bounce ideas off of, where I can hear a human response instead of a conditioned academic response. So I'd like to utilize that skill of yours in a greater capacity and run some things past you where we really get into the meat and potatoes. So I want to make sure I get your contact information. Bernie, if you want to text me stuff, or Mike can do that number, that'd be awesome.
Engineer.
I'll be on the show more regular as well.
100%, Mike. You are invited back to any and all of the Real Science series.
Hey, Jeremy, before you go, I got to ask you a quick question.
Jeremiah.
I'm a little rusty on the spark gap thing. When people creating a spark gap, are they able to regulate the frequency of the spark, or is it just uncontrolled?
Once again, like we mentioned earlier, it's not so much a matter of frequency, but rise time and fall time. That depends on the inductance and the capacitance of the system and its resistance as well. And
so you can actually create your own frequency with a spark gap?
You can create a pulse that has an equivalent frequency, a half sinusoidal or full sinusoidal ring down. So you can get that same kind of effect, but it's not. I don't want to consider it to be a frequency, because imagine that you strike a bell that only rings for like 1 second, but you take 1 hour between each time that you ring that bell. So I guess you could say your frequency is like 1 hour, but what is the actual frequency of the individual bell ringing as it rings down? It's going to be a lot higher than that 1 hour time gap between those things. So these pulses, they do have a frequency equivalent, but I like to think of them more in terms of the duration, or the duty cycle, instead of a frequency.
So the frequency it does vary.
It varies tremendously. Yeah, it's one of the things that changes as these systems become less or more saturated.
What if you can get that frequency with your spark gap to be non-variable?
You can do that with a triggered spark gap. I can control that, but if you're talking about a natural resonance, then you would basically be meeting your output radiated energy with your input LCR system, and when the two meet each other, it should be pretty consistent.
So you don't want you want it to be a variable frequency.
It's nicer when you're trying to get some self-proliferating effects. For example, when you're looking for like ferroresonance and you want that to cascade and build itself up, it's nice there. It's terrible when you're taking measurements, though, because it's super hard to take measurement on something that has a frequency which is changing.
And what application do you see non-variable frequency in your project?
Generally, it's for power distribution. When I'm trying to give a certain amount of current at a certain fixed voltage, it makes it a lot easier to power supply design something with a fixed frequency, because you know exactly what each pulse is going to give you in terms of its amplitude, voltage-wise. And so then what you're changing is a duty cycle to vary the current. And
when you do your experiments with the propulsion, you're using variable frequency?
For most part, yeah. When it comes down to these Aether effects, it's all variable frequency because it's relative.
You prefer it that way?
I prefer it has to be that way, not so much a preference, but it has to be variable if you want to build up a phenomena that changes the speed of light, because the frequency.
You want to keep it analog. You want to keep an analog character.
I see what you mean. Yes, let me completely agree with you. At the back end, where the actual devices, all of these things.
Because nature is analog.
All of these systems at the back end, the final output stage is analog. So we can use digital control circuitry to keep things nice and even, but at the back end, everything is analog in some manner of speaking. So it's either analog in radio wave transmission or acoustic output, or some other magnetic interaction. There's always an analog side where the stuff physically manifests in three-dimensional reality.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've never experimented with the asymmetric capacitors or none of that stuff yet.
It comes down to speed. With all those systems, you won't see anything if it's slow. And the only way to change that is by using the works of T.T. Brown, for example, who injected charged metal particles in order to generate a change in that velocity. And there is lots that we get into at another time, and that's one of the things that I'd love to go over with you and just have your mind kind of compute the implications of these things. But all right, I'm super hungry. It's time for me to go eat something and hang out with girls.
Fair enough, Jeremiah. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, brother, and Exotic Propulsion is Jeremiah Pop. Also, other channel, Join the Technicians. But if you want to follow JP one more time, here is his channel in the live chat. Make sure you go subscribe. And also make sure to go subscribe to Mikey Does on YouTube. Mike with us. Here's Mike's channel one more time in the live chat for everybody. JP, Mike Does. And
put that one in the private chat too, because like I'm not even watching on YouTube right now. So
Jeremiah, you're freaking abusing the system. Just kidding.
My connection is my connection is not suitable right now for.
I feel you. I'm just kidding, brother. There is Mike's channel for you to click on the private chat.
I'm gonna go ahead.
Oh, good, brother. All right. So on that note, thank you everybody for watching. We're at exactly 2 hours, so we will call that a night as it's one. It's exactly 1:11 a.m. Sorry, 1:11 a.m. in Alberta, Canada right now. So I can only imagine how late it's for any of you on the East Coast or anyone watching from Europe. Midnight on the West. What's your last thoughts before everyone goes on Hawaii? Do weapons because it's a volcano? Arson, tragedy, regardless, that should not have happened within America in this day and age, but already 50 confirmed killed or more. Just brutal. Are you guys aware of what's happened? The fires in Hawaii?
No, I'm not. Actually, I've not even heard of that.
I heard about the fires, but not exactly how they started or anything like that.
Yeah.
Is this a forest fire?
Yeah, supposed forest fires, but it burnt like an entire city pretty much on one of the main islands, and it was, quite.
Could be just the summer heat.
Could, right? Exactly. But the videos, you see some questionable lights and explosions and stuff going on in the city fire. And apparently it just came out of nowhere and just burnt the whole city. And I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, right, 111 Illuminati confirmed. Synchronicity there, the sync. Okay, well, prayers for all those affected in Hawaii. And prayers to all those affected by fires everywhere, including still in Alberta and British Columbia, and Canada has been on fire for 4 freaking months straight now. It's nuts. It's still pretty smoky every day here where I live. So, yeah, praying for more rain, but not.
I'm in Florida. The Everglades here burn once a year usually.
Well, usually it's just August. Usually this is forest fire season in Canada. We're finally in forest fire season, but we've been on fire for 4 months straight leading up to this. It's a freaking crazy, ridiculous.
Every summer.
Yeah. Climate change of some sort. Maybe more radial energy coming in from above or below or both. I don't know. But on that note, thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching. And we will catch you all on the next one.